What if the most powerful weapon of the 21st century isn't nuclear, isn't digital, isn't even military? What if it's something you rely on every single day? Something so ordinary you don't even think about it. Something you urgently need to survive. Food. Today, millions assume wars are fought with guns, money, sanctions, drones. But what if the most effective form of control doesn't look like war at all? Famine without bullets, starvation without headlines, control without consent, because there is a dark truth hidden inside global supply chains, a strategy that turns fields, seeds, and farmland into weapons, a strategy that has been used for centuries by empires, governments, corporations, and institutions to control populations, force political obedience, collapse economies, and even redraw maps. This is the story the powerful don't want you to understand. Food as a weapon. How global powers use agriculture to control nations. The origins. When food became power, every civilization in history has understood one truth. Control food. Control people. But this idea of food as a weapon didn't begin with modern politics or globalization. It began with a question: who owns the land? Ancient empires like Egypt, Rome, and the Ottoman Empire built their power on grain taxes. If you controlled the grain, you controlled the army, and if you controlled the army, you controlled the empire. But the turning point came in the 20th century, when food stopped being just a resource and became a lever of geopolitical strategy. B-roll, black and white war footage, farms, government offices. In 1943, in the middle of World War II, the United States realized something shocking. The nation that feeds the world, leads the world. This idea became official policy. The US invested heavily in industrial farming, mechanized agriculture, chemical fertilizers, high-yield crops, not just to feed Americans, but to create leverage. When Europe was starving after World War II, food aid wasn't just charity. It came with conditions, access, alliances, influence, and soon, other world powers learned the lesson: post-war strategy, from aid to control. In 1954, the US passed a law with a very innocent name, Public Law 480, Food for Peace. It sounded humanitarian, it sounded moral, but hidden inside the pages was a tool that would shape global politics for the next half-century. Graphic on screen. Countries that received US grain aid are highlighted. Under Food for Peace, the United States sold grain to developing nations at artificially low prices. This sounds like a gift, until you understand the consequences. Cause and effect breakdown. Cheap US grain floods a foreign market, local farmers can't compete. Domestic agriculture collapses, the country becomes dependent on imports, imported food becomes a bargaining chip. Political decisions now favor the supplier. This is dependence disguised as assistance. Now ask yourself, was that an accident, or a strategy? Starvation as statecraft. Let's move to the 1970s. The world changes, the Cold War accelerates, oil becomes a weapon, and global powers realize, if oil can bring economies to their knees, so can food. In 1980, after the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, the US retaliated, not with bombs, not with troops, but with a grain embargo. Millions of tons of food, blocked. Cause, political disagreement. Effect, starvation risk, and the world learned, food is leverage, seeds, patents, and the new food monopoly. But the biggest shift wasn't geopolitical, it was corporate. Corporations realized something governments had always known: owning food means owning power. In the late 20th century, 4 companies began dominating global grain trade. Not 40, not 400, for their names barely appear in mainstream media, but they move more food than some countries produce. On-screen text: Cargill, Archer Daniels, Midland, Bunge, Louis Dreyfus. In the 1990s and 2000s, a new battlefield emerged: genetically modified seeds and patented crops. For the first time in history, companies could own the building blocks of life, not the farm, not the grain, the seed itself. Imagine a world where a farmer can't plant seeds from their own harvests, because the seed is copyrighted. Imagine legal contracts governing biology. This is not science fiction. This is the present. When nations lose food sovereignty, what happens when a country can't feed itself? It loses leverage. It loses autonomy. It loses the ability to say no. Case study number 2, Haiti, 2008. For decades, Haiti imported cheap foreign rice. Local farms died. When prices spiked after a global crisis, the streets erupted. Food riots, political collapse, not because of war, not because of invasion, because of dependence. Case study number 3, Yemen. Blockades and supply chain warfare made famine a tactic. Starvation became a negotiating tool. Case study number 4, Venezuela. When economic sanctions hit, food access became a political weapon inside and outside the country. Each crisis begs the same question: if a nation relies on outsiders to eat, is it truly sovereign? Food control in the age of globalization today. Food dependence doesn't look like war. It looks like trade agreements that crush rural farmers, seed monopolies that force annual purchase, farmland bought by foreign investors, supply chains designed like trapdoors. Countries are discovering that globalization has a cost no one advertised. If someone else controls your food, they control your future. The numbers no one talks about: narrator on camera, rapid delivery. 10 companies control 70% of the world's grain trade. 3 companies control 60% of global seed supply. The top 1% of farms now hold over 70% of farmland in some countries. Farmland is being purchased by foreign investors at a rate of 30 football fields per minute. Over 800 million people are food insecure. While the world produces enough to feed everyone, so is hunger a natural disaster, or a design flaw? And if it's a design flaw, who designed it? What history warns us about tomorrow? Look at every era: ancient empires, grain taxes, colonial era, plantation monopolies, Cold War, food aid as leveraged neoliberal era, seed patents and trade dependency, modern globalization, corporate and policy-driven supply control, different tools, same strategy. The weaponization of food isn't an accident of history, it's a feature of power. Failed solutions and uncomfortable truths. Attempts to solve this problem often fail for 3 reasons. Technology creates dependency instead of independence. Mechanized agriculture sounds like progress, until you need foreign fertilizer, foreign tractors, foreign seeds, and foreign financing. Food aid solves symptoms, not causes. It treats hunger like a crisis, not a system. Sovereignty requires sacrifice. Self-sufficient farming is slower, more expensive, and less profitable, which makes it a hard political sell. And so countries remain trapped, dependent or starving, powerful or obedient. There is no neutral ground. Today's global tensions right now. World powers are moving their pieces. China is buying farmland in Africa and South America. The US is consolidating agribusiness and export dominance. The EU is pushing regulation that reshapes global markets. Saudi Arabia is purchasing water-rich farmland overseas. Russia is using grain exports to increase diplomatic influence. Who wins this game? Who loses? And what happens when climate change, supply chain breakdowns, inflation, and political instability collide? At the dinner table. Conclusion 3. Takeaways. What we've learned. Takeaway number 1. Food security is national security. There is no independence without the ability to feed your population. Takeaway number 2. Dependency isn't always obvious. It hides in trade deals, patents, and supply chains. Takeaway number 3. The future of power is not who controls weapons, but who controls resources. If history shows one truth, it's this: empires aren't built by armies alone. Sometimes, they're built by fields. Sometimes, the most effective chains are invisible. So ask yourself, who feeds you, and what would happen if they stopped? That question might determine the future of nations, and maybe, your own. If this story opened your eyes, share it. If you want more deep dives into the hidden systems shaping our world, subscribe. And in the comments, tell me this: is food the next battleground of global power, or has the war already started?